tuning in. My name is Nate Zuniga, joined by my beautiful wife, Tiffany. We are the lead pastors of Salvation Home. Salvation Home meets every Sunday at 10 a.m. We do our Wednesday night videos. We've been working on rebranding them, switching them up, and so we're going to be getting really actually started about 6 o'clock. We want to jump on a few minutes early to get folks on. We've entitled our Wednesdays Table Talk. We want to talk about God. We want to talk about life. We want to talk about church. And we're very, very, very excited about this new series that we're going to be doing called So You Don't Want to Go to Church Anymore. A lot of people have been hurt. A lot of people have had frustrations. And a lot of people don't want anything to do with church. And in some instances, God, because of what's happened and what they've seen. So over the next several weeks, and we want to hear from you. We want your feedback. We want you to jump online, type in the chat so we can answer your questions. If you've been hurt in a church and you're hesitant to go to a church and you have your own issues and your own struggles with why you don't go to church, what are those? What's happened? What's gone on? And so over the next several weeks, that is our plan. We have some topics that we want to address, but we also want to address some of the issues and topics and hurts and things that you've personally dealt with in your own life. And so we're waiting just a few minutes to jump on. Invite a friend. Listen, all you got to do is share this broadcast with somebody right now. Tonight, we're going to be talking about money. And this is not an easy topic. It's not a fun topic. It's honestly, for me, a topic that I've avoided for a very long time. Because a lot of times people feel like all churches do is ask for money. Have you ever felt like that? Right? If you have, type it in the chat, like, post, whatever. Have you ever felt like, or just what are churches doing with money? Have you ever felt like, why are churches, why do they get tax exemption? And what do they do with their funds? And what is this and what is that? Babe, money. People have been hurt. What are your thoughts? What are your...
Well, your comment about, have you ever heard people say, all churches ask for is money? And I know you have, but I actually have not. When, growing up, being in a Catholic church, they would bring in somebody once a year.
Yeah. And
they would say, okay, sorry if you're a visitor, but we're going to have a family talk, and today we're going to talk about money. And the whole service was about money and tithing and giving and where we are and where we want to be. And that was it. That was the one time a year that they would ask for money. Now, moving over to a non-denominational church, they would have a series, like maybe after January, February, start the new year off, let's talk about tithing and giving, the blessed life, and all kinds of things like that. And it would be, 3 or 4 Sundays. But I didn't mind, because the way it was coming across was not, give me all your money, and then you never see what's going on with it. But I have wondered, where is this money going? What are they doing with it? How come everything still looks the same? But now that we have a church and we've decided to do this, we don't ask for money. If we are doing stuff, we will ask for donations. And it doesn't always have to be money with us. We give an exact thing. We're going to give away backpacks. If you have supplies, bring supplies. If you have backpacks, bring backpacks. If you don't have time to go and do that, bring money and we'll go do it for you. There's always a reasoning why we're, asking for donations. And, thank God that you can see what we're doing with the money.
So people have different backgrounds. So our question to you is, if you're watching right now, what are your thoughts towards church and money, right? What was it like for you growing up? Or if you weren't raised in a church, maybe you just kind of see stuff on TV or whatever. What are your own thoughts, right? We want to ask you, please type it in the chat, because we're watching. We can see who's online watching. We want to answer your questions. What are your thoughts towards the church and money, right? Do they ask for it too much? Where does the money go? If you were Catholic, like my wife grew up Catholic, they didn't really talk about it too much. Whatever. What is your background or your knowledge? What were you about to say?
I was gonna say, I used to work with a man, and he told me that he didn't go to church because the pastors or the priests, they were all thieves. And I was like, well, you're going to have to talk to me and tell me why you feel like that, because I don't believe that my husband's a thief. And so I kind of got offended, and he was just like, well, I think that they are. And I was like, well, why? Like, your thought is not, I need an answer.
Yeah.
And he said, well, Jesus, didn't have anything. And he just wore sandals and walked around in the desert. And so I reminded him, we don't live in that time anymore. And, God is our Father. And he had children. This gentleman had children. And I asked him, I was like, do you want your children to grow up the exact way that you grew up? Or would you want better for them? And he was like, well, no, I always want better for my kids. And I was like, okay, well, God is our Father. Why would he not want better for us? And there was no answer.
So the question we have for you watching right now is, what is your past experience? What are your personal thoughts towards money? And we want to see it. Type it in the chat right now. What are your thoughts towards the church and money? Because a lot of people do have issues. I know back in, was it February when we had the big ice storm and all of that happened? When people didn't have electricity, I was seeing a lot of debates online with people who were like, why are churches not being opened as warming stations? And why are they not? I mean, I saw a lot of people debating this online because they were frustrated, because it's like, do we see churches asking for money? But now here it is. And, the whole, North Texas, all of that, because of the storm, needed money. And so, I'm sorry, our dogs are barking. But, we saw this crisis with the ice storm and all of this stuff going on. And a lot of people were frustrated with churches that were not opening as warming stations, right? And so we saw it big with, was it Hurricane Harvey that hit Houston? And old Pastor Joel Osteen got tore up for not opening up his church. Is why do we see some of these pastors or churches who have millions of dollars in budgets, but they're not doing more for people and doing more for communities? And what are your thoughts on that when you see that? You know what I mean?
I see, I can only see, it says there's more people on here, but I can only see Pastor Chris. Hi. Do you have an opinion? Would you care to share how you feel?
Yeah, and so type it in the chat. What are your thoughts? And then we're going to dive into this conversation on how the church handles money and what are your personal thoughts or your personal opinions on it. I want to read some statistics that I was reading earlier, as far as if you want to know if giving, is it in the Bible, right? Is it in the Bible? Is it talked about? Does God talk about money?
Yep.
The reality is that there's over 2,000 verses in the Bible talking about money. So money is obviously a very important thing to God.
Yes.
And Jesus, out of his 38 parables, 16 of them addressed money. So money was a big thing that was talked about and addressed in the Bible. And so it's very important that we understand this is not just churches. This is in the Bible. Money is talked about so many different times over and over to teach us a lesson. And I think sometimes, I'm just going to be honest, I think some churches have mismanaged funds. I have been in churches where they guilt you into giving, right? If you're going to be blessed, then you give. If you don't give, you're not going to be blessed. And they guilt you. I've had pastors bring up, the pink slip to the lights or the building. If you don't pay your tithes or your offerings, then we're not going to have money to pay the bills and all of these different things. And so, I get it. I get it, because sometimes people just feel like, I've been in churches where they pass around the offering plate 7 times, and they're going to pass it around another time until everybody gives. And I guess now being on both ends of it, seeing how things go. So my big thing when we started the church was because I had experienced some issues with, a church that I don't know if they mismanaged funds, but it was, you always felt guilty if you didn't give and, all of that. And so I had a big issue with that. And so I told God when we decided to start Salvation Home, I said, God, I don't want to talk about money. I don't want to bring money up because I had my own personal issues with it. And I had felt like, maybe churches or pastors had mismanaged it before. And I didn't want to be like that. And so God, I said, if we're going to do this, I'm not going to ask for money. And no joke, for the last 2 years, we have not asked for $1 to start Salvation Home. We've done fundraisers. We've had things where we're like, hey, if you want to support, this outreach that we're doing, go ahead and do it. And here lately, I felt big conviction in my heart about why I wasn't talking about. I was just avoiding the issue. And that's not a good thing either, just to avoid something and not want to talk about it because you have your own past or history with it is not okay either. And so over those 2 years, here's what I would tell you about God. God was faithful to us.
Yep.
And I mean, we were literally able to raise $40,000 over the year 2020 to accomplish the mission that God has for us as a church. And we did it without asking for money because he knew where my heart was and he knew what I was dealing with. And so God didn't, he blessed that. He did. He blessed my request of not asking for money. And, over 2020, a lot of people had more issues with churches because why are churches not out and doing more as people are struggling, as people are going through the pandemic? Why were churches not doing more? And I'm honored that our heart and Salvation Home, we served over 10,000 meals during 2020 and we'd never even opened the doors to our church yet. We weren't allowed to. We gave 250 backpacks away to the community because we saw the need and how people were struggling and dealing with things. And, we did all that without even asking or talking about money. God just blessed it because he knew that's where our hearts were.
And we don't say that to boast and to brag.
Yeah.
We say that because we want you to know this is what we're about. This is what we're doing with the money that's been given to us.
Right. And so, it's just, that was my own personal issue and struggle with money. And here lately, I have felt a conviction why I haven't done more to teach about money, because obviously, biblically, money is a very important topic. And so the first thing that I want to say is that we've got to understand how to manage and how to deal with money because there's so many different parts of it. Number one being, God owns everything.
Yes. God
owns everything. And I've heard that said, God owns everything. He doesn't need your this. He doesn't need your that, which is very true. God created everything. But what we are created in God's image to be like God, to exemplify and show others who he is.
Yeah.
And here's the reality. God created the whole universe, created the earth, created plants, vegetation. We've been talking about it on Sundays. God created everything. And you know what he did? He gave it to us. He said, here, it's yours. Our God is a giving, a generous God. And if we're going to reflect him, if we're going to show the world who he is, we'll show that through our own generosity and giving.
Yes.
And so that's one thing, it's hard to find generous people nowadays. Mm-hmm. That's the reality.
Because they've been hurt or they just don't want to.
Or they judge what people are going to do with the money.
Yeah.
Right? And
and so let me just say, what was it that I was telling her? Hannah Grace, we were talking and I was giving her an example because there are some people that say, this is what I do, me, I. If you do something, let it be done and then walk away from it. If you're going to give money, yay, great, that's awesome, but then give it away. Don't attach yourself to that and then try to have a checklist to see what that person's going to do with it. If it's in you to give and give it away.
Yeah.
Don't, what are they going to do with it? And how is it? And what? That is not up to you anymore. You've done what God's wanted you to do. And
Jesus talked about it over and over because the religious, hypocrites and Pharisees, they would give so that people would see them.
Yeah.
And
yes.
A lot of people see that and they're like, they just this and that. They're hypocrites. They're just doing it to be seen. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that's very true for some. That's very true. They do give so that others see it, right? They don't know how to bless somebody or give or be generous without taking a picture and posting it on Facebook or sharing or showing or doing, you know what I mean? And they don't know how to just be a generous person, knowing this is who I was created to be because I am a follower of God and he created me in his image and my God's generous. I mean, John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave. He gave. So over and over in scripture, we see our God being a giving God. And so if you're going to follow Jesus, you're going to be generous. That's going to be your nature. And that's not just towards giving to the church. That's going to be towards giving to other people. And when you see a need, do you feel, and here's another big thing, is do you feel compassion for others? Mm-hmm. And I know that you want to give. Mm-hmm. right? Because some people, when you see the homeless person, when you see the person struggling, do you say, well, that's their own fault, they put themselves there, right? Or do you feel a compassion? Because as followers of Jesus, we should have compassion and for others, and want to bless and be generous and give and all of that. And so that's what we should do. We should feel compassion. But a lot of times, you'll say, I'm going to give the $5 to the homeless guy on the corner, but I know what he's going to do with it. He's going to go give it. He's going to go, buy drugs or buy alcohol or buy whatever. And the reality is, it comes down to your heart. Are you a generous person? And that's another big issue, and why it's so important, and the Bible talks about it so much with money is, it's about your heart. That's what this comes down to, is it's your heart. Mm-hmm. It's your heart. Mm-hmm. And are you, because babe, you want to read that scripture, it talks about, right? And we've heard this scripture misquoted over and over and over all the time, but
it drives me nuts.
Go ahead and read it.
So let me read it the way I always hear people say it. For the love of money is the root of evil. That's wrong. It's wrong. People say it wrong all the time. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It's that kinds. It's all evil. It's many evils. It's not one. It's all of it. It all gets wrapped up in money. And
some people just say money by itself, not the love of money, just money.
Yeah.
Money is a good thing, right? We all want it. We all strive for it, right?
So it goes on. So for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. That's not the end though. But that's the only part people really take to. It goes on and says, and some people craving money have wandered away from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. Because they're so wrapped up in, I have to have money, I have to have money, I have to have money, that they are creating so many problems. They're in so many sins that they've hurt themselves. God doesn't give us money to be hoarders of it. He gave it to us so we can share and so we could give, as He gave us everything. He made light, He made the heavens, He made the earth, He made light, He made animals and humans, and when He did, He said, this is all for you. And here we are. No, you can't have this, and you can't have this, and I need this. This is all mine. And what? We have to be better.
But that's the sin. That's the nature of our hearts when we choose ourself over God. We choose our own selfishness, our own desires, our own ways, and money.
But He didn't do that to us.
No, yeah, and that's the reality of the world we live in. Is you are mine, and we see that. Not just, that's from the day we're born. We are selfish and greedy, and we want more money. And here's what the Bible teaches is when you accept Christ in your heart, He says, I'm going to give you a new heart. I'm going to give you, I'm going to put my Spirit in you, and that new heart is going to be a heart that wants to bless, a heart that's generous, a heart that wants to give, right? Mm-hmm. And that is what this comes down to. We hear over and over in Scripture, guard your heart. It's all about your heart. What's in your heart will come out of your mouth, and that's the reality of it. If you are a greedy person and you're only looking out for yourself, we're going to see that. Mm-hmm. It's going to come out in the way you live, the way you act, and some people get so caught up in that, right? Where if I just had more money, the reality is you'll spend the rest of your life chasing that.
Yeah.
And that's another big principle taught in Scriptures is contentment. The Bible says be content in what you have, knowing God's going to take care of you, right? Mm-hmm. And so can you be content with what you have, with where you're at, right? And say, you know what? God has blessed me, instead of looking for more or bigger or better. You know what? God's blessed me. He's given me a good life. He's given me good things. He's a good father, instead of a constant striving for more and holding on to what you do have, and then not allowing yourself to be generous and giving and have a giving heart, right? And I think that's the big issue. And so people who have an issue with churches who are giving, the reality is I would ask people the question, are you generous yourself? right? Because the one thing that we do a lot is when we have an issue within ourselves, right? We like to call everybody else out on their own problems, right? We don't want to talk about ourselves. We don't want to talk about what we're dealing with. We want to call everybody else out. So when I see people who are like, this church should have done this, and where's this money going, and why do they get tax-free, and why aren't they doing this? I'm like, well, wait a minute. When was the last time you gave? When was the last time you opened up your home? When was the last time you did this, right? You want the church to do all these things, but the reality is you're not willing to do those things yourself. And so that's my big thing for them. And they call people in church hypocrites and that. But my thing is are you doing those things? And you know what? Here, I'm not going to lie. Churches and money, people have been hurt by it. People have been hurt by it. You know, churches have used money inappropriately and done things with it, and we've heard pastors stealing it and doing awful things with it. We live in a fallen world. We live in sin. We live in an evil world. That's going to happen. Again, but where's your heart? Where's your heart? Where's your heart? Are you content with where you are? Do you understand that your Creator is going to provide for you? He's going to give to you everything that you'll need. And are you generous in wanting to give and bless and help others, and do you have that heart? And listen, also, you know, when it comes to giving, you know, again, it boils down to where's your heart. If you're struggling with giving to where you're going to church at, you know, because you're like, I don't know, I don't see where this money's going or this and that, then maybe it is time that you plug into a place where you do feel comfortable and you do see where the money's going. You know, you don't go to a church that's transparent with finances. You don't know how much the salary of this or that. Because here's the point. Now that we've started Salvation Home, we get the other end of it. So now I want to defend churches because there are bills to pay. There are, you know, mortgages and leases and things you have to pay for. Mm-hmm. And the reality is like a household, there's a budget and there's finances, right? And the pastors of those churches carry that weight.
But it's not just the bills. It's not just the light. It's you have to pay for chairs, and you have to pay for sound system. And there's so much that you don't realize that you have to pay for. But God is so good, and it always comes through. Whether we really want the soundboard that costs, you know, $5,000, or we, you know, end up buying the one that costs $200. It doesn't matter because God always provides, and we give all of our wants, all of our needs to Him, and you know, some way, somehow, He just makes it happen. And He does, and He's been doing it ever since we said, yes, we're gonna do this. We're gonna. But
the point of it was that pastors, they carry that weight.
They do carry that.
So when I hear of a church that's they passed around the plate 5 times, I'm like, well, have you asked the pastor what the books look like? Because he's carrying that weight of we're not going to be able to pay. And if you have you ever not been able to pay your own bills, you know what that feels like. Mm-hmm. You know what that feels like. Well, we don't have the money to pay for that. And you know the stress that comes with that and the burden that comes with that. And pastors carry that not just for their own households, but then the household of God and the burden that comes with what they have to pay. And so, listen, it's a two-way street. People just want to point out others and what they're doing wrong, but I would just tell you this is, listen, churches do better. Do better managing what you have. Don't want the bigger, the better, this and that. Take what God's given you and put a budget together.
Yeah.
That's how you have to do it personally. You have to budget your funds. You have to have a good plan put in place. You have to. And you know what? As God blesses it, you do more and you give more and you're able to do more, right? That's personally have a budget, but churches have a budget, right? We want to have these big buildings and do different things. We made the announcement and we're really feeling like God's leading us to stay in YMCAs. Why go get a building? Why go get a bigger space that we're going to have to pay more money for when we can utilize our funds to bless more people and give more to our community? That's our heart, right? And so that's what happens is churches get into these big loans and debts and this and that, and then they overextend themselves just like you do with credit cards and new cars and, you know, things that you want. Mm-hmm. You put credit on.
You have to, you know, listen to God in what are you there for? Is it to, you know, put on a good show? Is it to, you know, have people come and it's like, oh, look how fancy we are? Or is it about the people that are walking through the doors, no matter what door it is, it's in a big, nice, fancy building, or the YMCA. It doesn't matter. It's a soul. It's God's creation walking through that door every single Sunday. And us attacking that, just loving them. Attacking may not be the right word, but just loving them.
Sure.
It's not the right word. I meant it in a good way. But just loving them. And it didn't matter, if they look like they belong or don't belong. We're here to love each other.
Yeah.
That's bottom line. We're here to love each other.
Exactly. And that's the point is for this, whether if you're a follower of Christ, here's what I would tell you, right? I'll address you first. You've accepted the call. You've accepted Christ in your life. We're to reflect God's image, so we need to be generous. If you're a part of a church, bless that church financially. Give to that church financially. Support their mission. Support their vision. Support them advancing the gospel. Support their, whatever they're trying to accomplish with, their mission, whether it be impacting the community, whatever that. Give. The numbers of people who give, I think it's less than 40% of actual members give to their local church, and it's like, man, could you imagine what a church could do if 100% of their people were giving and financially pouring into their church, what things they could accomplish and do, right? And it's about your heart. Are you greedy? Are you seeking after the things of this world, or do you have more desire to advance the kingdom and grow the kingdom and build your community, and all of the things that the church wants to do? Be a financial support of that, and watch your heart, guard your heart, you know what I mean? Because if you find yourself with the tension or the tug of struggling to give, the Bible's very clear, give with a cheerful heart. It should be, we have an opportunity to give, we get to give, not a, my God, I got to do this again. It shouldn't be a hurtful, hard thing to do, to give. And so do that. Give to your church. Not just give to your church, but be a generous person. You know what I mean? You see somebody at the grocery store who's not able to pay for their groceries, pay for the meal at the restaurant. Be generous, because in doing so, you're reflecting God. You're showing people who God is. So be a giver. And I tell that to be a giver. Be generous. Give. Money is not a bad thing. It is a good thing. It is a tool. It can do great things, but it can also do harmful things, as we read in the scripture, right? The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It can lead to your greed and your lust and all of the things that sin does, right? And money can finance your way to that, and growing in that. And so that's what I would say to the follower of Christ is guard your heart. Make sure you're giving and you're being generous and you're supporting your church. And if you've been hurt by a church because of money, I am so sorry. People are people. People have mismanaged funds, all kinds of things, right? In the name of the Lord. And I apologize deeply for that. If you've been, I don't know what your experience is, what your hurt is, what you've gone through as far as when it comes to money, and when you see this, the church is just asking for money. That's all they do. They don't talk about anything else. Hey, go look at different churches.
Yeah.
Because they're not all like that.
Yeah, they're not all like that.
They're not all like that. They're not. Some of them just genuinely want to spread the gospel and impact their communities, and find you a church that's transparent with where money goes and different things like that. And so do that. And then the next thing is examine your own heart, right? If you're looking at the church and what they are not doing, okay, is that something you're doing, right? Are you generous? Are you giving? Are you that? And so that's what we wanted to get on here and address and talk about. So listen, type it in the chat, your own thoughts, your own experiences, hurts, pains with money and church and all of that. Here's what it was been in our heart, and we're going to have more talks over the next several weeks of people who've been hurt by churches and things that have happened. And so money's just one of them. Money's, it's a big one for some people. They just want money. They just want money. And that's why a lot of people don't go to church, or they do go to church and they don't give. So I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons behind it, but we felt the need to get on here, and over the next several weeks, we're going to talk about topics of why people don't want to go to church and what their issues with church are. And money was the first one. And I get it. I had my own personal experience and hurt with money and being at a church that I felt like didn't handle money right. But God's healed me, and now I'm working on it. And I want to talk about it. I want to share with others the blessing of being generous. There's no better feeling.
Yeah.
I'm serious. There's no greater feeling than calling somebody or giving to somebody, or, you know, we get to go bless some people today with an awesome gift, and it's just great to be able to go do that, and it's an awesome feeling.
Hannah Grace, how do you feel whenever you're able to give $1 or be generous with somebody? How does that make you feel?
Good. I mean, good.
Good. Anytime, I always tell her, you know, she doesn't have to worry about her purpose in life, because, I mean, since she was a little girl, she's 11, but she was, I don't know, 3, she's always had a heart for homeless. So anytime she sees a homeless person, she's like, I need money, I need $1. She's not asking, how come they're there? Why don't they go get a job? What do you think they're going to do with this money? Like, she's not asking those things. She wants to know where we can get some money fast, because we usually don't have cash with us. Or, you know, if we don't have money, she's like, let's go buy them something to eat because they're hungry. You know, how can I give to this person even though I don't have money? And she's 11.
Yeah.
It's just that generous heart.
Teaching your kids to be generous. No, feeding into that. I know one of the things that they do is we eat mints, and so when we have an empty mint box, we put change inside of it and fill it with change and keep it in the car. That way when we do see people and it's like, oh, yes, we do. We've been waiting for this. We've been waiting for this moment to be able to bless you or give to you or that, whatever, you know. And so that's the message. That's what we wanted to talk about. Again, if you've been hurt by church, it happens. There's going to be pastors and churches who mismanage funds and do things with it that's people. But not every church is like that, right? And don't let what somebody else does determine what your heart should do and what God's called you to do and give and all of that. And so please, you know, again, Table Talks every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. We're just over the summer, we're going to be talking about you don't want to go to church. Church hurts, pains, issues. So if you've had a bad experience in church, message us, type it in the chat. We want to talk about it. We want to deal with it. You know, we're going to be talking about church people being hypocrites and fake, and, you know, some of the other things that we're going to cover just with church and what's turned people off from going to church. And the numbers, if you look at statistics, they're just bad, right? More churches are closing than opening right now, and it's just a difficult time. And, you know, our heart is for people to have a passion and a heart and a desire for the church, and to see the church advance and to see it grow. And it's a beautiful thing. It is. The church is designed and created by God. It's a beautiful thing, and you get to be a part of that. And so we're going to start the summer with why you don't want to go to church and hurts and pains and issues, but we're going to finish the summer with why it's important you do go to church, because it is very important. And a lot of people don't feel that way, and 2020 shut every church down. And I think the reality is we're seeing it more and more now is, you know, people now are just choosing not to go to church, right? I can just watch this online. I don't have to go to church. I can just watch online. And that breaks my heart, because that's not how church was created. It was created for fellowship. It was created for us to get together, to go make a difference together, to make, you know, to go into a community and that community grow and be blessed and advance because that church is there, and that is a beautiful thing. So what's your experience with money in the church? We want to hear about it. We want to talk about it. You can type even after this video. I don't know when you're going to watch this, but you can type in the chat we had some technical difficulties. I know some people were commenting. We weren't able to see it.
Yeah.
But type it in there. We're going to get on. We're going to answer your questions. You know, have you felt, what's your experience with money in the church and your hurt and all of that? Please share the video with somebody, because our goal and our mission here at Salvation Home is to show the difference following Jesus makes in our lives. And Jesus makes such a huge difference in our hearts because Jesus was generous and giving, and we want to be that same way. And we want you who are followers of Christ to be that same way and exemplify Him so that God can get glory. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. We love you. Sunday mornings at 10, Wednesdays, table